Okay, everyone. Well, it is 7 o'clock and I would like to get going. Thank you so much for coming to this next edition of the Naval Association of Canada's Toronto Branch Speaker Series. Normally, we would be at Canadian Forces College, but given the virus situation, we are all socially distant at home or wherever we happen to be tonight. But through the power and magic of technology, we are gathered here to listen to Mr. Gordon Laco, a retired naval officer from HMCS York. And tonight he's going to talk to us about his work on the movie Greyhound that has just come out recently, if any of you have seen it. So because Sir already has control of the meeting and you can see his picture up there, I will turn the meeting over to him. Over to you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Barbara. And I'll say something at the start I was going to say partway through, but it was actually a talk about a movie I worked on that got me into the Navy back in 2003 or 4. But I'll get to that later. So it's funny, I'm full circle. Now I'm out and I'm talking again. Here we go. Oh, that's interesting. It won't advance. Oh, there we go. So that's me at work. Just by way of introduction, I operate a business whose umbrella title is GH Laco and Associates Limited. My associates are sometimes my left and right hand, and sometimes people I bring aboard to join me for particular projects. We outfit museum ships and working sailing vessels all over North America. We've actually rushed stuff to Europe. I got a phone call once from the captain of Pride of Baltimore II, who called me breathlessly on my cell phone, and I realized he was at sea in the Bay of Biscay, and he'd just been dismasted. And my first question to him was, is everyone all right? He said, yes, no one was hurt. He said the main and the fore fell port and starboard of him when he was standing at the wheel. He said, if I'd had the time to move, I would have been killed by one of them. But at any rate, he said, can you ship rope to La Rochelle, France? And I said, sure we can. And that's where he was going. Unfortunately, I never got to go there and see the famous U-boat pens and the site of the HMS Campbelltown attack. In conjunction with all that, I should say also, questions and answers are probably the most interesting part of my talks. I'll make sure there's lots of time, as much as you want at the end, but I'll plow through in the meantime, unless I see one of your faces looking really horrified or puzzled, and I'll take that as my cue to pay more attention. I did a virtual talk back at the beginning of all this stuff for the Jane Austen Society, and I'm used to having an audience I could see, and I often go off script if I see they're interested or not interested in what I'm talking about. So on that one, I decided to start with a joke. So I said, it's great to be here as a disembodied voice in the auditorium. There apparently were 1,100 people there with my pictures being projected. And I said, I think you'd probably like to know what I look like. So I put up a picture of Admiral Lord Cochrane when he was in his late 80s, all covered in medals, and there was dead silence. And I thought I'd be able to hear something over the phone, but there was dead silence. And I was thinking, oh my God, they don't get the joke. But luckily for me, the guy that was running the PowerPoint projector texted me. I looked at my phone and he wrote in capital letters, "They are laughing." So at least I can see some of you here, and that's good. So in parallel with what I used to call my real job, I do historic consulting and technical advising for film and television projects. I was speaking with my accountant doing taxes last year, and I told him that the big films seem like nothing I can ever plan for. It's like winning some sort of lottery when they come, although they're a damn lot of work. I'll talk about that. He looked at me and he said, Gord, it's been pretty steady for 25 years. I think it's what you do. So that's the thing though. I never know what the next one's going to be. The next one is always one that's come out of the blue, not the ones that I've been chasing, but I feel compelled to chase them anyway. So I was in the marine business from the very beginning of my my working days. Anybody remember Tom Taylor Company down in Adelaide and Jarvis in Toronto?
Yeah.
I was my late uncle Con Costas's successor there in the rigging department in the store, something that made me very proud. And I've always blamed him for me going into the marine world, because when he passed away in '73, too early, he left me all his books and models. So there seemed to me like no choice about where I was destined. My career went through various lefts and rights and ports and starboards until we decided to move to Midland on Georgian Bay, where I am right now. And back in those days, I discovered a historic site then called Historic Naval and Military Establishments, now known as Discovery Harbor. And after writing notes and letters and volunteering and so forth, they called my bluff and hauled me aboard to join the marketing department there. And later I became captain of one of the schooners. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you? Well, at any rate, she's the, yeah, good.
Yeah, we can see it.
The smaller, oh, that's very useful. I'll keep that in mind. HMSB is the smaller schooner on the left-hand side. She's about a 25 ton reproduction of what we think one of three warships looked like that operated there. Yes.
Sorry, just want to interrupt you. Our dear friend John Anderson I can see him, but he said nobody's let him in. And I'm wondering, do you have control of the,
I don't know how to do that.
as far as the...
Okay, I'll try to minimize. Geez, I don't know how to do that. I was made
Sorry, everyone. I'm seeing John Anderson, and I'm seeing that he is in the meeting.
Okay, good.
Okay, so he's getting no sound. So that might be just his computer. I'll talk to him. Thank you.
How about Pierre Taillon?
Okay, good.
You hear me?
I see John.
How about Pierre Taillon me?
Yeah, we can see you, Pierre. Yeah,
Yep.
we can see your head.
See me? Okay. I'm good looking as ever.
Okay.
Talk to the head there.
I just can't get in. I need somebody to let me in.
Yeah.
John, you are in. We can hear you.
You can hear him on my phone, I think.
The marvel that is technology.
No. Yeah, but I have other people are having the same issue because the other person I sent the link to said I can see you, but I can't hear anything.
Okay.
Barbara, is it possible for you to take the host back?
I can. Yeah, I can take the host back and see.
I don't know what we can do.
No problem, John. Barbara's going to just take the host back and see if she can let you in, okay? Hang on.
Hello, John.
All right, thanks.
Oh, John, you're in, but you don't have your microphone running.
Beautiful ships.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, wrong one. I'll go back.
John, have you turned on your microphone?
Yeah, my mic's and my whole thing's on. All my audio's working, everything.
Okay. Hang on. I'm going to just turn off my phone for a sec, and why don't you see if you can talk to us?
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me? Beautiful ship, Pierre.
No, can't hear you now, John.
No.
Funny, beautiful ships.
I can see John's mouth moving, but I can't hear him now.
John, we can't hear you just on my cell phone. You know what? I can leave my cell phone on, and you can hear what's going on, John, if you want through my cell phone. That works.
Is he muted? Is he muted? Is that the problem?
I don't see him as being muted. He doesn't have a microphone on.
Yeah. So Barbara said that Zoom has said that you are in the meeting. You're not muted on the meeting, and I can't see your.
I can't. Okay. Well.
Why don't you just listen on my cell phone, John? And you,
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to try something.
Okay.
Just give me a minute.
No problem.
Besides, John's probably heard most of my stories anyway.
No problem, John. Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Gord. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries, gents. I hope it works out. Well, okay, just since everybody seems interested, HMSB is a replica of a schooner the Royal Navy built on Georgian Bay in the winter of 1817. There were three of them built over at Wasaga, then brought to the Naval Dockyard. Tecumseh, the larger vessel on the right, is about 175 ton. She was built at Chippewa down in the mouth of the Niagara River above the falls in 1815. She missed the war, but she and her sister Nawash were intended to face Niagara if there was a resumption of hostilities. So at any rate, we operated those vessels on the lakes, and it was a very interesting experience sailing them around. On the right, that's me back in those days in the 90s. That's how we dressed when the public could see us. On the, sorry, on the left. On the right is how we dressed when the public couldn't see us. We dressed to keep warm. And I think that picture was taken on the way to Michilimackinac after a very cold, rainy night with shortened sail. I guess none of us looked very happy. In those days, in the marketing department, I realized there was money to be made and publicity to be earned by letting the sites be used as locations for film productions. So I developed, in the course of my work for the Ontario government, a courtship program for film projects. And after I went back to the regular marine business in the private sector, people kept calling me, and I found I was doing a TV documentary sort of on a constant basis. This photograph here was taken in probably the mid-90s for a movie starring Jeff Daniels called The Crossing, about Washington's crossing into Delaware. I usually start my stories about my movies by saying that was a stressful one. Well, they all were in their own way. This one was interesting because the producers in California who wanted to come to Canada to shoot the film didn't understand that spring was coming. So by the time they got their ducks in a row and we were ready to start shooting, everything was turning green. It was turning into summer. So thinking swiftly and remembering I'd seen huge compost piles of leaves in the city of Hamilton where we were going to shoot the film, I arranged for dump truck loads of leaves to come and be spread around. You can see them behind us there. We used a filter on the camera to take some of the green off the budding. And the white you see is not snow, it's white fiberglass insulation. Another problem we had on that project was hundreds and hundreds of extras. And extras are generally in three categories. They're decent people who have other means and maybe just want to work on a movie because it's interesting. There are people who can't get a job anywhere else. Sometimes they're mentally ill, sometimes they're street people. And they're historic reenactors who kind of know their stuff and know how to handle weapons and so forth. So what I did on this one was organize a corps of reenactors, made them corporals. There's one of them standing beside me there. In the Revolutionary Army, a string on your shoulder meant you were a corporal, an NCM. And I put each of them in charge of 12 to 20 wild people, as I called them. And I trained the corporals and they trained the mob. And that actually worked out by using military hierarchy. I was still a civilian in those days. So I did that for a long time until along came a film called Master and Commander. I was working as sales manager for a large marine importing company in Barrie in those days, which were distributed across Canada. And because of my interest and involvement in the sailing ship world, we started importing rope. And I was contacted one day by the captain of a ship who was a good captain, good ship manager, but I realized most of the time was skinning the treetops financially and struggling to keep his ship properly equipped. One day he phoned me and said he needed to replace all his standing and running rigging quickly. He'd already FedExed me the rigging diagrams. I needed to be ready to respond fast with a quote because I was going to get the job and I needed to move. And I said, geez, thanks, and hung up. And then I thought, where the hell is he getting $80,000? And I guessed that someone had engaged his ship to be the frigate in Master and Commander. And it turned out I'd guessed correctly. HMS Rose had been bought by 20th Century Fox. And to make a very long story short, about a year later, I was down in Mexico aboard the ship shooting that movie. That was a life-changing, career-changing experience for me. What was a once-in-a-while part-time thing for small projects suddenly became huge. And I'll say also the Royal Canadian Navy noticed me. I was invited by the old NOAC to come and speak at York at Battle of the Atlantic dinner by a gentleman who I believe was on this call. Thank you very much for that. And in the course of the evening, describing how we made that movie, Matt Davies, who was XO of York, he just retired as a captain a few days ago, stood up and thanked me for my presentation and told me that his wife had been talking to my wife, and my wife had told two things. One was that I'd wished I'd joined the Naval Reserve when I should have, when I was in university. And the other thing was my age. I was 49 years old then. And Matt said, you're not quite too old. If you want to go for a commission, we'll support it. So we got the ball rolling, and I found myself over at HMCS Venture at Esquimalt doing 1 million push-ups a day with a bunch of 18-year-olds. But that's another story. Actually, this photo was taken at HMCS Star. One of the last things I did in the service was serve as one of the officers conducting Corporal Cirillo's funeral. That was a moving thing, and it was a fitting end to my my naval career.
Gord, is there any chance you might? I have a friend of mine, Ted Barris, is trying to get into the lecture, and so apparently you have control. So you're the only one who can admit someone in.
And I have no idea how to do that. I'd love Ted Barris to join us. Jesus, Murphy, I don't know how to do that.
Hang on, I can reclaim host.
Just for a moment,
please.
would that be possible?
All right, here we go.
Sorry about that, Gord. Thank you.
People
No,
are
please
coming
carry
in.
on. There he is. Hello, Ted Barris.
We got you, Ted. Good.
He's connecting to audio. There he is. Hello, Ted Barris. You and I met once at CBC. You probably don't remember.
Oh, he's got a good.
Oh, he's muted.
Okay. Well, I'll just plow ahead then. Half speed ahead. Damn the mines.
Okay, I'm
Thank
back.
you.
Thanks.
Oh,
We probably talked when I was doing Ontario many years ago, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Sandy Moe had brought me down one morning, and we crossed in the hallway coming in and out of the studio.
Carry on. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No worry. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So after Master and Commander, my work doing television and film continued. The photograph on the top left was a very interesting one where we went to CFB Shiloh in Manitoba and did a documentary about the capabilities of historic artillery pieces. We made and fired shells to Henry Shrapnel's original pattern. First time in probably 150 years we think that happened. They were devastatingly effective. Horrible things. And we, as a climax to the show, we put an original 1861 Parrott rifle, 9-pounder, on the field beside a modern LG light gun that the Royal Canadian Light Horse Artillery uses, and that's the sergeant of the gun team beside me. And we had them fire 5 rounds each at a target that was 1,200 meters away. Guess which gun hit the target almost on the bullseye 5 times out of 5, and which gun never even hit the whole sign once. It was the 1861 Parrott rifle. The modern Canadian gunners commented to us that because of range rules, they had to reduce their charges. So their gun was basically lobbing the shells at the target. We could actually see them in flight, and it fairly shredded it with fragments. Whereas the Parrott rifle was flat trajectory, very high velocity, and it was drilling its shot through like a laser, but that's a whole other story. We did several World War I documentaries, 4 of them based on archaeological expeditions to battlefield sites at the Somme, Luce, Passchendaele, and Vimy. That was a very sobering experience. And in those days, by then I was in the Navy, and I started polling Naval Reserve personnel to come and be extras in the films. They were damned motivated because they were all interested in their nation's history. But more important than that, if I said, B company, right here, form up now, they would be there in about 3 seconds. And they handled their weapons like they meant business. So they were perfect special skills extras for documentaries. The photo in the middle there was taken in the battlefield we built near just off the 400 north of Toronto. I found a field that had the right sun and the right angles to look like the approaches to Vimy. And we got the farmer's permission to make a battlefield there. I was interested to watch that man. He very carefully removed all the topsoil. I didn't like rolling up a carpet almost. I didn't know you could do that. And then we messed up the fields to make it a fair representation of the Somme, which was difficult because the bulldozer and the digger operators we hired mark their talent and their skill on how evenly they make their cuts. I didn't want those cuts even, so we had constant debates about how to make things look random. That gentleman in the picture there, I believe, is a sailor from HMCS York. That shot was taken just before dawn. He'd been doused in water and working hard all night, and he had a disgusted look on his face, which was perfect. And that shot became the poster shot for the documentary series. And I titled that a Soldier of the Great War. What we were doing in that one actually was recreating the supposed last minutes of the 5 soldiers we'd found on that particular expedition over in France, unfortunately, none of whom we were able to identify. The shot on the right is just pure fun and games. We were doing one about the Battle of Culloden down at Fort Erie, Ontario. And during a break of what was the usual very low budget Canadian historical documentary, where everybody had to put uniforms on in order to bulk up the numbers, I was having a debate with a friend of mine whose knee you can see on the lower right corner with a limp wrist hand on it, about whether girls found kilts and white linen shirts sexy or red infantry uniforms. And you can guess which one I was proposing. So I made him a bet of a beer that whenever he said go, wearing my red infantry uniform, I could have a young woman I'd never met sitting on my knee within a minute. And he told me to go to hell and said, okay, go. Well, what he didn't know was there was a bus disgorging tourists right behind him. He hadn't seen that. And as soon as he said go, I jumped up, slapped my knee and said, photos right here. And you can see the result. So sometimes documentaries are fun. So that continued merrily for quite a number of years until October of 2017. That fall, I was here home in Midland. My wife was in Victoria visiting her family. And as usual, when she's away, I was watching a war movie on TV and fell asleep with the pizza on the coffee table. Woke up after midnight and realized I'd fallen asleep in front of the TV, looked at my iPhone and saw there was a Los Angeles number that had called me half an hour earlier. And the message was, call me now. It was, it was a call from a gentleman named David Coatsworth, a producer I'd done The Crossing and American Gods with. And he was working as the producer for Tom Hanks' upcoming adaptation of The Good Shepherd called Greyhound. Mr. Hanks told me that he wanted very much to do another World War II drama in which he starred as the commander, but he's the same age as me, over 60. We're too old. And somebody gave him a book by C.S. Forester called The Good Shepherd, and Tom looked at the cover, and there's the captain with his white hair, and of course the pith of the story is that he's too old to be doing what he's doing. And it was the pressure of the war and the circumstances that threw him in where he was. So that became Hanks's next project, and I was engaged in October of 2017. That's David Coatsworth, the man who hired me. My last project with him was a TV series called American Gods, which is a very weird sort of fantasy show, but there's Vikings at the start, and they needed someone who could rig up a Viking ship, and that's the one we built. It's actually beached at, below the Scarborough Bluffs there. Everybody thought we were doing the History Viking series. It wasn't. And we trained up a crew of stuntmen to be Vikings, and I taught them how to row the thing and so forth. It was completely unsafe on the water, so we stayed in very shallow water all the time. And the director wanted us to sail it at one point when he saw that the rigging all worked, but I declined. One interesting anecdote there was one of the stuntmen confided to me that he used to be a sergeant in the PPCLI. And I said, isn't that interesting? I was in the RCN. And he said to me, listen, sir, he said, if we start getting giggly, like people do after a couple of takes, you just yell at us like you would have in the service. So I said, okay. So after a couple of days of training, we were out there shooting the film, and we had to shoot the Viking ship rowing up onto the beach. So we did a take, and we went back out, and the damn thing was so unhandy. It was quite difficult to control. So as I was giving the rowing commands, standing in the stern, while we were shooting, of course, I was hiding under a bearskin, so the camera couldn't see me, with the director beside me and the cameraman peeking over my shoulder. I gave the order oars, and then hold water. Well, hold water, if anyone who rows boats knows, you drop the blades in the water, hold the looms against your chest, and that's basically putting the parking brake on. Well, they were all talking and giggling to each other Some of them on the port side did it, some didn't. Same on the starboard side. And the thing started yawing badly. And I didn't want to be late for the next action. So looking at this ex-sergeant who was looking up at me with one eyebrow raised, I yelled, "What the F is this?" I said, "Hold water, so hold effing water." And I really let that roar. Bang, all the oars dropped in the water. And I heard the director behind me say, "Geez, Gord." And then I turned into nice Gord again. And now that I had their attention, and away we went. So maybe military training is good for shooting movies. After considerable work ahead of time, I went down to Los Angeles with a spanking new work permit and found that Doug Coleman was the stunt coordinator. I hadn't seen Doug since we made Master and Commander, about 40 TV shows and movies in 18 years earlier, so our offices were side by side. Something Peter Weir said to me while we were shooting Master and Commander stuck with me, and I told it to my new colleagues on Greyhound, as I've told other directors. Peter was asked in an interview after Master and Commander what it's like taking a good book and turning it into a film. And his answer was, when you pick it up, all the words fall out. And what he meant was you lose the narration, you lose the narrative that's the author talking into the mind of the reader. We don't have that anymore in a film. So we have to help the actors by shrugging shoulders, by looking sad, by looking happy, by camera angles, by lighting and music. Try to help the audience understand what the author might have taken 2 or 3 pages to describe, where we only have a few second of visual or audible cues. So it's quite a task, and I've always admired C.S. Forrester's work, and of course Hanks's work is to be admired. We wanted to do a good job for him, putting those words back in that fell out when the book was turned into a screenplay. So I set to work doing that, and that's a shot I took of my desk. That round object on the upper right is a historic artifact that I brought with me, and I'll describe it right now. It's a circular protractor, and it belonged to HMCS Assiniboine. A neighbor of ours here in Midland was one of her officers in the epic fight she had with U-210 south of Greenland. And Bill told me in his older years, before he passed away, even as a 18-year-old or 19-year-old as he was then, he realized that he had witnessed history. So that's the protractor he used when he was plotting positions and trying to keep up with the ship's movements on her bridge. He put it in his pocket, and when he passed away, he left it to me. I've got it on the desk beside me here right now. And what I did with that for this movie was I brought it with me to the location we were filming on, and I handed it to Hanks, and I described to him what it was. I showed him a picture of my friend Bill Lenoz when he was a young man and an officer, and I described the fight with U-210. And Hanks held it in his hand, and he said, "This was there." And I said, "Yes, it was." And he said, "Good, we're going to have this beside us while we're shooting the film." And he did, and you'll see it on the chart table in the wheelhouse scenes whenever you can see the chart table through the film. I've done that with other actors, and I have to say, I've never failed to move them by doing something like that. And making them think about the real people that they're portraying is part of my job. So in a book, when they're describing an action, they might say the convoy was steering 080 degrees magnetic and proceeding at 8 knots, and the escorts were arrayed in a screening pattern in front of it, zigzagging. Well, what does that mean to a computer compositor who's got to animate the whole thing? So my job became, in the early stages, drawing plotting sheets. Of course, in movie land, they'd never heard of plotting sheets, to show what was happening every time ship movements were described. And what we did with these things was create a cyber world in the computer software where there existed convoy HX-25 proceeding from Halifax to England at 8 knots at various courses, and where her escorts were moving around them, and where up to 7 U-boats were attacking, and aircraft sometimes appeared. And what we needed to do was keep those ships moving in cyber world. So if you saw them in scene 4 at the beginning, and then you saw it again in scene 35 later on, 15 minutes later in movie time, well, that ship would have actually been traveling for 10 hours maybe. And where would it be in 10 hours going at whatever speed it was and whatever courses had been ordered. So I drew these sheets for every time ships were described. And I can see my notes at the top here. Dickie, that's HMCS Dodge, or fictitious corvette. And Victor, that's the fictitious Polish destroyer, have detached to investigate a contact. The action is Commander Kraus adjusting the dispositions of Keeling and Dodge. And on the note on the right, I say script, page 3, describing the action, and ebook, page 11. I always made references back to the books because I learned very quickly that C.S. Forrester knew what the blazes he was doing. I saw in the flyleaf he had 2 retired US Navy captains as his advisors when he wrote the book. But he wrote the book right after the war, and he was very careful that to get everything right. And even if you draw out everything he describes, everything works. But what I had to do was recreate the drawings he may have had on his desk when he was originally writing the book. I'll insert something here that seems appropriate. I noticed when rereading the book in preparation for the film, there was no mention whatsoever of hydrophone in the various submarine hunts. And for those of you who don't know, a hydrophone are the listening devices, very sensitive devices that ships and submarines use to listen for the beat of propellers or the sound of machinery. And it's a critical part of anti-submarine warfare. I think that even though hydrophone was a more primitive weapon than sonar or ASDIC or radar, I think Forrester left it out because the book was written so soon after the war, he didn't want to give the whole game away. He also didn't mention Hedgehog, which was starting to be used then. We decided to leave Hedgehog out because just because it would have introduced more cost in the film. But I was given permission and direction by Hanks and by the director, Aaron Schneider, to write in every scene where it was appropriate, actions and words relating to the ASDIC operator listening to what the submarine was doing. I convinced the production that what that did was basically create a line of narration where the sonar operator or ASDIC operator was telling the captain what he could hear happening below the ship. That's invaluable in a film. And what I've just described actually covers many, many 18 and 20 and actually 24-hour days working, both here in my office with hours and hours and hours on the phone talking to LA, and later when I was down there working in the studio in Los Angeles, where sometimes we went right around the clock. So I'm not complaining. It's exciting work and I love it, but it's not simple. This is a drawing I did describing describing for the computer compositors the action in a submarine hunt that only partially survived in the film. The penciled vessels, pencil vessels are the positions of the American destroyer. That's the star of the star of the film, and the little arrows on it are the directions, are the bearings being called by the sonar operator. The red dotted line are the supposed movements of the submarine as the destroyer is sniffing about trying to follow it. A critical part of the story, of course, and the real history is that the Type 7 U-boat could far outturn a fleet destroyer. It had a much tighter turning circle by almost a factor of 4. I had to go to a lot of I won't say difficulty, but use all my eloquence and persuasiveness to describe to the production that fleet destroyers were not nimble. They were fast, they were powerful, but they were not nimble. When they were designed in the late 30s, the supposition was that they would be used at high speed in open ocean to screen battle squadrons. The submarine hunting capabilities was an afterthought, and nobody thought that would be their main job. So here is our story where Hanks's character has a very powerful fleet destroyer capable of 36 knots, but it's creeping, hunting at less than 10 knots sometimes, a submerged U-boat that's going at less than 3 knots to be quiet and can outturn it. And that leads to the drama in the film if you've seen it. So in this particular action, it was one of the early battle scenes. We had 3 sub-hunts that were failures because, of course, one of the main themes of the novel is that the crew of this American destroyer are proud of themselves, but they're completely green. They have no idea what's going on with regards to submarine hunting. And through a quirk of Hanks's character's career, he's a commander. The rest of the escort captains are lieutenant commanders. So Hanks is in charge, although he doesn't know what he's doing. And in a way, they go from there. So I've got in a box here probably 200 or 300 of these drawings that we used in the course of making the film. So those drawings then would get taken and put into the software. And in this one, you can see looking over the director's shoulder, Keeling is the American destroyer. There's the U-boat. There's the Polish destroyer that's just dropped some depth charges. And all the minute movements have to be mapped in. And I remember the horrified looks on the film crew when I was describing how long it took a destroyer at 12 knots to complete a circle with the rudder hard over. And I forget the exact figure right now, but they all looked at me and said, well, that's too long. And another time in this particular scene, they asked me how deep the U-boat would be. And I said, oh, probably 600 to 700 feet. 600 to 700 feet? Well, how do they see where they're going? Like they assumed that submarines had to keep their periscopes up all the time. So I started describing time, speed, distance calculations and dead reckoning. I could see their eyes glazing over. And then the question came, well, okay, Gord, say they're 600 feet down. How long did these depth charges take to sink? Well, that was more than better part of a minute. So they said, we can't wait that long. So my job in the film, as in all historic films I work on, is I show them truth as far as we know it. And I think of that as the tracks down the center. So if the production knows where the tracks are and they have to go left and right of that to make the story work, they know when they're fibbing or when they're bending physics. And by the way, on the lower screen, the director has the script in front of him, so he's trying to visualize what's being described in the script. So after that work was mostly done, we moved into a magic place, which is basically a virtual reality stage. And we're up to, I guess, Christmas time 2017 now. This soundstage looked like a gymnasium. It had colored tape we put on the floor, which is the outline of the basic structure of the bridge of a Fletcher-class destroyer. Of course, you can't see it, but the computer can see it in the room. And on the image on the right, you see in gray and white tones, the bridge of the destroyer with the actors on it. You can't see it with human eyes, but if you put goggles on, oh my God, there's a destroyer in the room that fills the whole space. So what we did was take action in particular scenes where animated figures would have to be and directed them to do the action. And what this actor here is doing right now is registering himself wearing the suit with the little ping pong balls all over it. And the computer is memorizing his dimensions. And once it's got him locked, we can start him doing his action. And that's actually Dan Speaker, who was the sword fighting expert on Master and Commander. It tickled his fancy to accept an invitation to come and be an actor for us in the virtual reality stage. Well, that's not much of a reaction. So that's me at work. I'm glad somebody was taking pictures of me. I guess working on movies is like having kids in a way. When you have your first one, you take tons of pictures, and later you don't. So fortunately, there someone took a picture of me. That array of black boxes behind me is the virtual reality terminal. I would dart back there to be able to look to see where the invisible convoy or warships or aircraft or U-boats was around our set, so that I could then go and tell the actors what direction to look. I'm wearing headphones with one ear off so I could hear the director calling for me. I've got my books and scripts in a bag over my shoulder, and it was fairly stressful but pretty damned interesting work. Goodness me, this is, okay, here we go. So in the midst of all that, the United States Navy sent a captain to talk to me. And I was retired from the Navy by the time I was on this, and I only attained the dizzy height of lieutenant. So a captain is a fairly august figure. But being a civilian and being up to my hips making this film, I thought it was pretty interesting that this captain from the States had come to the set to make complaints about the script. They shoveled him over to me to deal with. So I got to know, his name was Russ. I got to know him fairly well. And he had binders full of problems that he wanted to talk about. Namely, he didn't like the idea of U-boats coming inside the convoy on the surface. He said that could never happen. He didn't like ramming. He said that could never happen. And I very patiently described to him the history of the Battle of the Atlantic and how these things, yes, they did happen a fair bit. And I used actual incidents in the choreography of the battle scenes that I was writing. For example, Assiniboine versus U-210 Chilliwack's fight, HMCS Oakville's fight down in the Caribbean. And we integrated all those in the movie. Those things really happened. And finally, when we were over dinner, he told me what his main complaint was. He said he didn't like the US Navy being made to look indecisive. He told me that his job in the public affairs, head of the public affairs department in the US Navy, was to present the US Navy to the American people in the world as decisive and invincible. And there I was sitting across the table from him listening to that. So I put my fork down, ex-Lieutenant Laco, and I said, Russ, you need to crack a book, mate. In the winter of 1942, the United States Navy was basically incompetent with regards to submarine hunting in the Atlantic, and it was not invincible. They didn't know what they were doing. But the point of the story is that they're learning their lessons. And he looked horrified, and I felt bad for him. So I said, Russ, does it not honor your service more deeply to show that it wasn't bloody easy? And then when I said that, he looked back at me and he said, you know, we never think of it that way. And after that, we got along fine. So back to making the movie. As happens in things, word comes from the studio, which was Sony in this case, to shorten or elongate parts of the film. So all those scenes that I'd carefully drawn plotting sheets for and that we carefully developed in Cyber World suddenly weren't there anymore. So how do we get the U-boat from where we last saw it or where we think it was over to where it needs to be? So that's work I did from here, and I've kept all my rough notes from that. And the director would be scribbling. That's his, in the color picture on the right, that's his scribble of the view lines from the bridge of the destroyer. And there's my drawings on how we were going to make that happen 57 minutes, 25.3 seconds into the film. We've got the U-boat blown to the surface, damaged. The destroyer is shooting at it. We need to get the Corvette out of the way, so I had her go hard to starboard. And it looks simple, but the brain power that went into making all that choreographing work was considerable. Here's another one, 59 minutes, a little further on, describing the action. I wrote choreography for all the battle scenes except the last one, which I'll get to, and key moments of dialogue so that the computer compositors could make the movements of the ship match the pictures they were creating. So one of the things we needed to do was make the ocean look realistic. So with Charles Brown and Jordan Holder, head of PA right now in Ottawa at the RCN, we obtained permission to put a B-roll film crew aboard HMCS Montreal. And away she went in January of 2018, doing workups in the North Atlantic. We were all terrified that we wouldn't get weather, but we did. And in the film, when you see bow waves, stern waves, wave trains down the length of the hull, and ships turning sharply, tracer bullets firing at night and so forth, that's all HMCS Montreal. I was so proud of our colleagues on that ship. When our visual effects team came back from that project, they went to sea for 10 days with them. God damn it, I didn't get to go with them because I was busy writing for the film at home. But they told me that they were absolutely astonished at the cheerful and competent attitude of everyone on the ship. There was no martinet-like stamping and saluting like they expected, and frankly, which they were used to on American ships. People did their jobs. There was no question who was in charge. There was no question of hierarchy and respect. But everybody was competent, and there was what they told me they called a can-do attitude for everything. In fact, they told me the only thing that Montreal refused to do for them was make an oil slick and set fire to it. They wouldn't do that. So the picture on the side I put on is part of a portfolio I put together for the computer compositors, trying to explain to them how wave trains along the length of a ship work as speed increases and decreases. And I should add also that Hollywood has a reputation for being fairly savage and shark-like, but the production, which certainly was not fat and was always in risk of going over budget, was so impressed with the cooperation we received from HMCS Montreal that they made a donation in the amount of $20,000 to the Children's Hospital of Montreal in the name of the ship. That was the best way they could think of to thank them. So back we are now to the sets. We were working at this point in the spring of 2018 in a giant filmmaking place called Celtic Studios in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, upstream from New Orleans. Did I see much of New Orleans? No, I was basically working and sleeping. I had a little one-bedroom apartment they fitted me out in, a little white car I called the Chickadee because that's what it looked like to me. And I basically drove back and forth to work making the movie. At a meeting where we were discussing trying to help the audience understand what the blazes was going on around the ship, I described to the production how what the US Navy calls the Combat Information Center, what we call the ops room, works in a warship. And lo and behold, there is a lighted plotting table there, and that is where everything going on around the ship gets written. So we decided to make use of that to help the audience understand what was going on. So when you see that plotting table in the movie, those of you who've seen it, that's my handwriting, and sometimes those are my hands doing the charting work. But it was a very valuable tool in helping the audience understand, because basically the whole room is a device to help the captain understand what's going on around the ship. And I was interested to describe to the production that in modern warships, the captain's actually down there. We passed a time in the early 1960s when the importance of information coming from sensors like radar, sonar, and so forth was of greater importance to the captain than what he could see with his eyes. So in World War II, it was the executive officer. Nowadays, it was the executive officer down there, and the captain was still on the bridge. One of the things we did was make sure that all the appendages of the room were working and were being used. And this is a status board. I didn't know what FL Center meant, so I just wrote my name on it. Can you see the cursor there? Zigzag plan number 4, guide, what's that? I don't know, so I just wrote none. Base course 087, speed 18 knots, identification friend and foe codes, none, because there's no aircraft out there. And there's the names of all the ships in the film with their courses and speeds.
NOAC.
Thank you. So we kept that up to date all through the film, and we bent reality sometimes in how this table was used. Again, the production did that to help the audience understand the action. And so I'll say again, I'm glad somebody was taking pictures because I didn't much on this one. That's me describing, oh goodness, I'm having a senior's moment, like my father says, forgetting that name, that actor's name there. If anybody knows it, shout out. He was Al Capone in Boardwalk Empire. He was in Saving Private Ryan. And I'll remember his name before this is done. He's a consummate professional. He's Cockney British, but when he needs to be a New Yorker, he sure sounds like one. And in this scene here, I'm showing him how to plot an interception using the table. This scene was from the first battle scene in the film. And he turned to me before we shot the scene. We're all standing outside because the actors had to rush in when they said action. And he said with his English accent, "Gordy, how far is it from my cabin to this compartment?" And I visualized the museum ship we were using that was just outside. And I put my mind through it, and I said, about 30 meters. And I described 2 passageways he had to hump down the ladderways of. And he said, "Thank you." So as he could see the team getting ready to shoot the scene and the countdown was going, he literally ran in circles until he used up about 30 meters. So when he jumped onto the set, he looked like he'd run just the right distance. I thought, man.
Stephen Graham.
Thank you, Stephen Graham.
Oh, it is. There we go.
Right on, Stephen Graham. And don't ever tell him, please, anybody, that I forgot his name. He's a really nice guy. I worked closely with him for all those months, and I'm quite impressed with him. This young man here, who my cursor is circling right now, is one of the many Gulf and Afghan war veterans that the production hired to be the extras in the film. This fellow survived being blown up by an IUD in a tank, IUD, and being pinned inside the thing for hours with his dead comrades. He was getting over a lot, and he actually told me that this was the first work he'd had in years, and it did him good to be back in uniform again. He said one of the things he missed was when he recovered from his injuries was that he was invalided out, he was no longer in, and he was alone. He told me he was playing video games in his parents' basement, putting on tons of weight, and doing many things he really shouldn't be doing that were no good for him. But things were getting better for him. And when we parted company at the end of the month, I shook his hand and I said, I hope we meet again and I hope I see you smiling. And he said, thanks, Gord. And by the way, I think I have a girlfriend. And I hugged him for that. They were remarkable young men. I heard many, many tragic stories, but my hat's off to those guys. They were the real thing. So here we are back on the set. We built a replica of the museum ship's bridge structure on a gimbal with screens all around it. And before doing each scene, we had to scope out what we're doing. So here's my friend Chad from Visual Effects holding his tablet up. And that tablet basically is a window into the cyber world, which can see the North Atlantic Ocean with 37 ships in the convoy and the wind blowing from the west and the sea state of this and so forth all around us. Well, what's really there is just the screens, but that tablet let us peek in the directions, and that's me standing there with the director, and that's Tom Hanks working through the scene about what direction he's going to look and what he's going to see. Same thing's happening in the picture on the right. What I did was make a cardboard Polaris with the usual 0 to 360 on it, and before we shot scenes, I'd jump in beside the particular actor, hold the Polaris up under their chin, and if the call is going to be burning tanker at 110, sir, I put the pointer on 110 and say, there it is. And we'd move a kid with a sign on a stick and say the tanker's name was Despotico, which was one of the ships. We'd move the Despotico sign over to the right position, then with Chad's help, adjust the angle so that it was on the horizon at the right position, so the actor wasn't looking too high or too low, while the set pitched and rolled as the ship would at Sea State 3. Very, very intricate work. Sounds simple, but it wasn't because it was changing all the time. Chad's a great guy. We stayed in touch still. So ongoing work during the film, actually any film, but this one in particular, anytime we saw guns firing, someone had to decide what elevation a particular gun needed to be at, what bearing it was aimed at, and what guns would be fired and what the time of flight for shells was. So I would work through the script, keeping ahead of the production with range tables for the various guns we had on board, and work that all out. I had to be quite well versed in the performance of various types of ship, how fast they could turn, how fast they accelerate, how long it would take to stop, and have answers ready for that. I'd have to be able to describe the performance of various weapons. And I've written here, star shell is a weapon, flare is a signal. That's something the production never understood. I tried to, again and again and again to tell them, star shell, it's a projectile that's fired from the 5-inch guns, travels at very high velocity with a huge bang. It explodes a couple of miles away and lights up an enemy. It's a very unfriendly thing to loose on somebody. A flare is a rocket or a star from a pistol that says, hey, here I am. It's a friendly thing to do. But they, in the picture, I think we only get it right once, but I'll let people write me hate mail by email if they identify them. I had to describe over and over again with delight and detail how a submarine works, and particularly what a Type 7 German submarine was capable of and what it could do. No, they did not cruise about with their periscopes up all the time. Yes, they went deep when they were in danger because they didn't want to die. They wanted to go home. They didn't surface unless they were damaged and blown to the surface, and so on and so on. And we had to discuss at great length the capabilities of radar and sonar. Interesting subject there. And Mr. Barris, this is something I'm sure you've encountered. We found men still alive and able to be interviewed who served towards the end of the war in American destroyers as radar and sonar operators. We interviewed them extensively, but we couldn't use much of what they said. They're old men now, and we needed to treat them with great respect but they weren't able to give us information that we could use. And I saw in one case in particular, we were distressing the poor guy, so I passed a note and asked for the interview to stop. They needed to be honored. Those guys need to be deeply respected, but I think they also need to be protected sometimes. So that was a very enlightening experience. And if you want to talk about that afterwards, I'll be glad to. Naval signaling, it took the production a long time to understand that the Aldous lamp was not a 360-degree light. I kept telling them, think laser, think laser. You don't want the bad guys to see the message. It's only readable by the person you're aiming it at. And of course, as I described with the Polaris, where should the actors be looking in a particular scene? So we used a museum ship down in the States. Her name was USS Kidd. She was in late Pacific War condition, but that was close enough for most of what we were doing. And she was in a permanent berth beside a levee on the Mississippi River, about 50 miles up from New Orleans. When we started filming, she was high and dry, like in the picture on the top left. When we were finishing, the water was right up to the top steps of the levee. And I never really understood what a levee was until I worked down there for a few months. The town of the city of Baton Rouge is actually about 80 feet below the bottom of the Mississippi River. The whole evil cycle started more than a century ago when they began building levees or dikes to try to control the flooding. But the silting causes the floor of the river to raise. So here we are now in the year 2018 when I took those pictures, where those pictures were taken rather. And the river was actually higher than the town despite constant dredging. So it's a battle they can never stop fighting. If they do, the river will win. And the day we left, actually, the water, as I said, was right up to the top step. We grew to really like Kidd. She was a brave ship that actually survived a direct hit by a kamikaze. We were very reverentially shown the patches on her, which are just behind that gantry you can see in the top picture. What happened was apparently the kamikaze's bomb was attached to a piece of I-beam that went clean through her and exploded on the far side. Unfortunately, when the aircraft was coming in, a large part of her crew who could move dodged to the leeward side away from the aircraft, but of course they were right there when the bomb went off and many of them were killed. So we paused in the production at one point and held a memorial service for them, which Hanks officiated. We also used our own Sackville and Haida. The British destroyers in the story are tribals, so we digitally scanned Haida and used her, and we sent a team to Halifax to digitally scan our Corvette, our Sackville. And I accidentally created a problem for Sackville there, but I protest innocence, I meant well. I gave the Corvette in our story, which is a fictitious ship, the pennant numbers of HMCS Shawinigan, because during my naval career, I was very heavily involved in the search for Shawinigan, which was, of course, lost with all hands in November of '44 off Port aux Basques, Newfoundland, while serving aboard HMCS Shawinigan, the modern vessel, MM704. So I gave our Corvette K136 for in commemoration of those dead men. And I hurt the feelings of the people on Sackville, but I'm humbled to say they accepted my apology. They understood what I was doing. So can anybody guess what's wrong with this picture? Aside from the guy wearing, go ahead.
Army.
Well, that's one thing. Yes, the helmets are wrong. It was just too jarring for the production to see the Brody-style helmets that the American Navy was using at this point. So we have late war helmets. But on the bridge, that's Mr. Hanks there with his arms in the air. The score marks on the bridge wing are, of course, from the Pacific War. And I had to be very vigilant to keep painting things like that out to make sure that they weren't visible. But that's a small thing. So we came home and then spent a whole year working on post-production editing, recreating scenes, rewriting dialogue, re-choreographing battle scenes to make things work when the producers took things out that left gaps in the story. That we were coming into the home run and getting ready to launch the movie, and the junkets were being organized for the openings in various parts of the world, and I would have been part of that. But COVID-19 came along. And what we ended up doing was standing down the whole shebang until word came out that the film had been sold to Apple TV Plus, who used it as the flagship to launch their new service. And I was delighted to learn shortly after that, when the media circus was going on, and I was very honored to be part of that, to be one of the spokesmen for all the brilliant people that worked on that film, that it was the most popular film that they'd ever launched. So good for Apple and good for us. This is the picture that I showed Tom Hanks of my late friend, William Lanose. I knew Bill as a gentle old man, but in World War II, he was a tough sea officer, and he served aboard Assiniboine, a number of British cruisers, and a long career that lasted until amalgamation in the mid-1960s. The navigation device, which is on the right there, is one of the things he left me. And I put that on the in the film in his honor, and I thought of him every day while we shot the film. Bill was a good man. I'll just tell two very brief stories about him before we wind this up, and I'll ask for your questions. Bill was quite ill at the end of his life. He died actually VE Day in '94. We were at our sailing club here in Midland, and he was leaning on a cane on one end and my shoulder on the other. We were watching boats being launched. And as usual, as a yacht was up in the air, there was 5 tons of boat swinging over some poor idiot standing there, I won't say picking his nose, but not paying attention. And out of Bill came the following. He roared, "You there!" Everyone froze, everyone, over this roar of the diesel of the crane. And then he yelled, "That man!" without pointing. Everyone looked at the guy that was under the boat. And then he yelled, "Out from under!" And the guy jumped like a jackrabbit to safety. And then the launch day resumed, and Bill looked at me and said softly, "I was trained to do that. I've still got it." And the other thing I'll say about Bill was something he told me when he was on his deathbed. He described in great detail an action he was in where his destroyer, Assiniboine, sank several German minesweepers trying to come out of Brest. Ted, you probably know the story. And he wept. He didn't remember that night with any pleasure whatsoever. And I tried to comfort him, telling him that if the men in those ships had got where they were going, somebody else would have had to fight them again. And he nodded, but he was remembering that. And then he looked at me and with his head on the pillows, and he said something that I quoted him every Remembrance Day on when I did speeches for the Navy all over the place. He said, "Gordy, I hate the war for it having robbed me of the carefree childhood I should have had. I hate it for the killing I witnessed and participated in." And then he closed his eyes and swallowed. And when he looked at me again, he was a tough sea officer. And he said, "But Gordy, nothing in my life ever matched being officer of the watch in a well-armed Canadian destroyer, doing 36 knots through the dark off the coast of France, looking for trouble." So that's the story of how we made that film and tried to honor people. We did things right and wrong. And I hope you have questions. I'm ready to field them. And I don't see myself yet, but I guess I'm in there somewhere. Anyway, does anyone have questions?
Yeah, Gordy, it's Richard Lewis here.
Hi.
You mentioned that had been sold to Apple. We tried to find it on TV because basically I got I think it's a Firefox or Fire Stick. And do you have to sign in and basically be a subscriber to the Apple TV?
Yes, you do, but I have good news. Apple, you can see it for free 2 ways. One is by letting your iPhone update its software. And if you do that, you get a free 1-year subscription to Apple TV, or you can sign in and get 1 week for free. So as long as you remember to cancel it, You can see the movie for free.
Yeah, because the phone
Don't tell
won't,
Apple I told you that.
yeah, the phone won't work because I'm Android and Samsung. But I'll try the free week. Thanks.
Right on. Well, hi there. I'll prime the pump about questions. There were some things that we did in the film that I was sure we'd be crucified for when it came out, but it doesn't seem that people noticed. And I was actually gritting my teeth and holding my hands in fists when the night it came out, waiting for the emails to start. But people didn't seem to notice. And I guess that's a lesson I learned over and over and over again. Feature films are not documentaries. We do need to be faithful to the facts, faithful to physics, faithful to what was possible and not possible. But when the director sometimes makes decisions that bend those things to help the audience understand the story, maybe sometimes that works without causing too much damage to history. I'm not going to tell you which ones scared me the most, but there were some things in there that terrified me.
Oh dear.
Hi there, Barbara.
Well, what an interesting time you've had, and what challenges you've met. I can't believe how hard you've worked in the last 25 years.
Well, thank you for saying so. Actually, I'll tell something very brief. Someone said once about old Gord's hobnobbing with celebrities, and my wife commented something like, "Oh, you don't see him at 3 o'clock in the morning when he's pacing in the kitchen." So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, yeah. No. Well, I knew you back when all that had barely started.
That's true. That's true, actually, Barbara. And I learned a lot at Toronto Brigantine. And one of the things I learned there that actually stood me in good stead when I became a naval officer, and certainly when I work on films, is that responsibility needs to flow.
Yeah.
And as executive director of Toronto Brigantine, when I sat down in Richard's chair, I realized that I was at the apex of two triangles. One beneath me, which was the board of directors, the donors, and all the volunteers, and everybody who wished well for Toronto Brigantine. I was at the point of all that. And above me was another triangle, which was the ships, the kids in the ships, the officers, and all the people that delivered the program. I had to support them. And if responsibility was not flowing from one triangle to the other, I would get ground to dust. And I needed to make sure that people's job descriptions, people's duties, all pulled the sled together in the right direction. That's how I thought of it. So I remember discussing with one of the captains an old issue where he didn't like a topsail yard. And of course, sitting in the desk where I was as executive director, I was wondering how to pay the phone bill. I really didn't want to have to take that yard down and rebuild it and give a refund for a course. And that's actually a setup to fail problem, because if I was not a good leader, like Richard was before me, and I sent that ship to sea with a captain who didn't trust that piece of rigging, people could get killed. So what I needed to do was to make sure that responsibility, physical responsibility that could be borne by the people at sea, turned into financial responsibility borne by the board of directors. So we created a system in that organization where once a captain reported something to me, it was my duty to report it to the board. And if it didn't get fixed, if I said I didn't have enough money, that ship didn't sail unless they found the money. And it was never that simple, of course, Barbara, as you know well. But the Navy is like that. And I learned that as School of Hard Knocks, and a film set is like that too.
Yeah. Well, the miracle was that it worked so well so often. And I think we saw you in a shirt with two small brigantines on it back about the third slide.
Yes, I was a walking advertisement.
Yeah, I noticed that, of course.
And I had my HMSB hat on, I think, too.
Gord,
Well, thank you.
sorry.
You're welcome.
Gord,
Hello, Peter.
did Tom Hanks ever feel salt water on his face?
Yes, he did.
He did, eh?
He did. Well, no, actually, good question. No, he didn't. It was muddy water from the Mississippi. But he did get a lot of it in his face, and he was a pretty good sport about that. And he was soaked and freezing with the rest of us. And by the way, if when you folks see the movie, there's close-ups of him inside the wheelhouse of the destroyer, and there's trickles of water running in. Well, that's because the thing was made of cardboard and doorskin plywood, not steel. But we decided to leave it because it made the place look more miserable, and I think it was. Actually, it's an interesting thing. Mr. Hanks commented to me one time when we were blocking out a scene. With the enclosed bridge, he was dashing from one bridge wing to the other all the time, bumping into people and charging through, which of course is described in the book. And he said, why didn't they have open bridges? And I said, well, we did, we being the Royal Canadian Navy. And I described that when the later in the war, when the US Navy developed their what they called destroyer escorts, they had open bridges.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Yes, Aaron, hi.
I actually was on the USS Kidd in 2016.
Ah,
I took my motorcycle down to Baton Rouge, and it's a beautiful sample of a Fletcher destroyer. And I was really excited to see the movie and then I knew that they used it. But I've read the book before the movie came out, and then I saw you going over your notes earlier in your presentation. What happened to the Polish destroyer? It became a British destroyer.
yeah, the Polish destroyer survived right till the end through production. There was a test audience in the States that was uncomfortable with the Polish accents being allies.
Oh.
They thought it needed
Wow.
more description. So I pointed out that the Polish ship would have had a Canadian or British liaison officer on board, so she could still be Polish. But at that time, things were happening fast. Apple was getting involved, and it became another British destroyer. And that reminds me, actually, early in the production, I was asked to write a paragraph on each of the 4 warships because we had the idea that the ships themselves would be characters. We needed to develop a character for them. As the film was contracted, we lost that aspect. But for the Royal Canadian Navy, I wrote a paragraph, which I'll share with you later if you like, describing a small young service rapidly growing to become the 3rd largest numerically in the world. Expert submarine hunters still are. I described what the barber pole on the Corvette we see meant. And I said the men were aware that every day they were creating traditions that would echo through the halls of history, blah, blah, blah. For the British, I described them as a service with a centuries-old history of success, so sure of their eventual victory that often their enemies believed in it too. I got that from my late friend Bill Lanoz. And for the Americans, I wrote immensely powerful, huge service, completely untried and unsure of itself, but learning fast. Okay, that's the Americans. What to say about the Poles? Well, the Poles hated the Germans. They'd lost their country to them. To them, their ship is not just their ship. That's all they've got of home. They don't go on leave. They may get off the ship sometimes to drink or whatever, but they don't get off the ship. The ship is everything for them. So how to get all that together into one paragraph, I found in Charles Lamb's book on the Triangle Run about the Battle of the Atlantic, a line describing a Polish officer overheard, actually, I think he was at a dance. And excuse my language here, I'm gonna use the F word, but I'm quoting a Polish naval officer, so I hope you'll excuse me for that. Imagine this with a guttural voice and a deep Polish accent. Enough of this lovemaking. Let's get fucking. The Poles were completely impatient of diversionary tactics. They were completely impatient about shilly-shelling. They wanted to get at him. And Hanks read those lines and he emailed me back, "Thank you, I understand perfectly." But we lost the Polish ship in the story, so that's what happened. But it happened fast and right at the end.
The action with the Canadian Corvette were some of my favorite scenes. Like you look at a Flower class Corvette, and like doesn't even look like a warship. No. But the way that you guys put that in, and you saw them chasing down the submarine and firing everything they had at it, that was one of the best scenes in the movie. Watching a Flower class Corvette at war.
I had one of the American sailors scream at it at the near miss, "Go get him, Dickie," or something like that.
Yeah.
I wanted the audience to know that these guys fought, and the Americans were standing back and all of that. Now, one thing about that ship drove me out of my mind. It was one of those things where, as always in a historical film, misconceptions creep in and have tremendous inertia. You can't get them out. And somehow the computer compositors put a twin 40 millimeter Bofors gun on the bandstand aft on the Corvette. Well, it should be an Oerlikon or a 2-pounder. And it plays heavily in the story because it's what's mowing the Germans down when they're side by side later.
Yeah.
It stayed as a twin Bofors gun. I expected hate mail, but nobody noticed. There, I leaked it.
Well, Gord, if you don't mind me saying, I wrote a book on HMCS Oakville, and it was an absolute treat to see a flower class in action in the film. I did notice that her forecastle was extended in the film because, and I'm not, which, I mean, it's not technically impossible considering the time, but they were in the process of getting a conversion done. Yeah. But I mean, that's just whatever, that's a little thing. Honestly, the work you guys put into it in bringing, I think, a very unrecognized, uncelebrated part of the Second World War. I mean, unless you're an avid fan of naval history, not many people will know what the Battle of the Atlantic was about and just how, why it deserves to be called the Battle of the Atlantic. And I think this movie does a significant part to help with that. Have you received any, to get to the question, because I just wanted to give a bit of praise on it. Did you get any blowback about the German submarine commanders breaking radio protocol and taunting? I mean, I understand for the film, it certainly it draws in a narrative in the audience, but did you get like a few grouchy folks sending messages at you saying, "Hey, why not have done that"?
I expected we'd be crucified for it because it was impossible, but no, nobody said, nobody complained. Now, my take on that was, I said, I asked my colleagues, have you seen Das Boot? And they said, yes. I said, well, it's probably the best Battle of the Atlantic film made to date. Think about the captain of that submarine. Can you imagine him so losing control of himself that he has taken the microphone that his radio operator made out of a toaster and a typewriter, because of course he wouldn't have one, and start making animal noises? Does that not denigrate him as a foe? And I commented to Hanks that I don't think it was an accident that C.S. Forrester gave the American captain a German-sounding name. I think he wanted us to understand that they're both professionals. Does that not make him more dangerous? But it's Hollywood, so there we are.
Well, it's almost, you'd almost like, your mind goes back to The Enemy Below, right, a little bit, and these old movies, and they try to do this a little bit. But I mean, I know, when I saw that, I was like, my eyebrow went up, and I'm like, well, it's a film. You have to accept it's a film. You're trying to communicate this to an audience of those that are not the initiated into naval culture as well, right? But I was just wondering myself. There was,
I told the production, I said, he wouldn't just listen to it. He'd say, change to channel 4.
Yeah, if it was possible, certainly. And I noticed it was a great move. I also am drawn to your story there with the American captain and just how he comes in and he's like, submarines wouldn't have tacked on the surface. It's like, it's a U-boat. It's certainly designed to do that. In fact, that was standard protocol, right? It's only with air cover, they start learning, all right, let's try doing it under the water and try our best. But it's amazing that, I loved your comment about, like, you got to crack a book open, right? And that resonated. I've had so many talks I've done, and I've had that challenge itself. Why was U-94, why was it going through the convoy on the surface? I'm like, that's what they did. And, have you looked at the shape of a U-boat, right? And how it's designed? It's well,
another thing that I thought we'd be pilloried for was the Catalina at the beginning. That was supposed to be a Sunderland from Gander. And I was actually, when we were working on that scene, I was on a short holiday in my boat here on Georgian Bay in Parry Sound, reined in by weather. Thank God there was Wi-Fi there. The director called me and he wanted me to send him Morse for a conversation between the aircraft and the ship. And the way that scene was originally made was I suggested that what we wanted was a frightened 18-year-old in the aircraft signaling to a frightening 18-year-old in the ship. And so after the official report, I had the aircraft flash, looks damn cold down there. And the ship answers back, looks lonely up there. I hope you make it home. But when the film was shortened, we lost that. And the aircraft was turned into an American one.
There's so much that happens on the cutting room floor. It gets left on there, and there's so much edited after the fact. But no, for your efforts that you put into it, bravo, Zulu. Fantastic.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody want to challenge me about red lights on the bridge? How could a warship go to war with red lights on in a bridge with the scuttles all open? Well, anyway.
Well, actually, I had a question for you just when I was watching the film itself, because I know from the sailors I interviewed that were on Corvettes, they were very big about the curtains that they had to go through and the double layers of them to keep the light from spilling out. But I wasn't sure what protocol was on American ships at that point in time.
Yeah, they did not go to war with their lights on, even when they were green as grass. Actually, one of the assistants said to me, "I saw Red October, and they went to red when they went to action stations." I said, "There's no windows in a submarine."
Well done. Well done.
Huh. Oh, well, that's about it, I guess.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
No?
No, thank you.
No? No,
Thank you.
sir, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really, this was an excellent presentation. I'm sure that we learned a lot. I know I did. This, this was probably the most interesting presentation I've been to in a long time. So thank you.
Oh my.
Now, I haven't seen the movie, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. My husband here has seen it 4 times, and he speaks very highly of it. Yes, that's my husband over there on the couch. We're both here tonight. So thank you. I want to thank you so much on behalf of the Naval Association of Canada, Toronto branch, for taking the time tonight to speak to us. We do have a plaque that is being sent to you. You should receive it on Thursday. So check your mail. You're going to get a delivery. But we're very grateful for your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Good. Well, I did know you were sending the plaque because you asked to confirm information for it, but I also noticed that you didn't give it to me until after the talk, so I guess I earned it. Thank you.
You did. You earned it. It was an excellent talk, sir.
Well, thanks a lot. And if anybody wants to discuss things with me, I guess my email address is available. If you Google my name, you'll get my website, and my email address is there. And I'm always willing to discuss things with colleagues, and I consider you all colleagues.
Oh,
That's
Thank you
great.
very much.
very much.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Gord.
Gordon.
Thanks for the talk also.
Thank
You're
you
welcome.
very, very much.
Thank
Take care.
you. Good night.
Thank you very
Good
much.
night. Bye.
Bye.